to a vet minimum. Here's Clark. Hits from distance.
Clark behind the backside. Step and knocks down a three. Opportunity for Indiana. Clark with 15 points here on the Knights. Oh, she's feeling it! We have had entire games in the WNBA without this much scoring. Clark answers!
Again, the poise and composure experience of Heidemann.
Clark, hey, triple! Trying to get Clark the ball, and they turn it over. Johnson with a steal. Johnson had it wrenched away. Clark knocked it off of Johnson. It's Fever basketball.
Under 10.
Clark fires. And hits! Caitlin Clark!
You wouldn't think this was the team that played a game last night. Clark, oh, it's open. Oh, it's a three.
There are multiple stories converging right now in the WNBA universe that deserve direct and honest examination, because taken together, they paint a portrait of a league that is watching the greatest thing that ever happened to it continue to excel, while simultaneously doing everything in its institutional power to diminish, complicate, and undermine everything surrounding that excellence. Let us start with the recognition, because it deserves to be the first thing acknowledged before any of the surrounding noise receives attention. Caitlin Clark has been named AP Player of the Week. This comes in the immediate aftermath of her historically unprecedented 41-point, 10-assist performance that became the first game of its kind in the entire history of women's professional basketball. The weekly award reflects what her statistical production has looked like across this stretch of the season. She is averaging approximately 25 points per game over the relevant period on around 44% shooting with nearly 8 assists per game. Nearly 8 assists, while operating under a minutes restriction, while managing a back injury, while navigating the most publicly turbulent and institutionally complicated period of her professional career. You simply cannot stop this. You cannot manufacture enough controversy, generate enough institutional friction, create enough media noise, or engineer enough organizational dysfunction to prevent Caitlin Clark from being exactly what she is. She is the best player in this league. She is producing at a level that no other player in this sport's history has approached under comparable circumstances. And she is doing it while everything surrounding her has been characterized by accumulated institutional failure and the kind of competitive environment that should not have to exist around a player of her significance. A P Player of the Week, while on a minutes restriction, while averaging nearly 8 assists, while other people in and around this league are running around constructing victim narratives and redirecting institutional energy toward everything except the accountability that the documented evidence demands. This is what Clark does with her competitive energy. This is the permanent record that the league's own award system is creating alongside the controversy and the organizational failures that have defined this season. The observation being made in the fan community that deserves serious engagement is the one addressing Clark's ceiling. When she is not on a minutes restriction, when she is fully healthy and operating in a system that genuinely leans into her style of play rather than forcing her into offensive structures that dilute her impact. When she has coaching and teammates fully committed to maximizing what she brings rather than managing her around a different organizational vision. The 41-point game with 10 assists represents what she produces under constraint. The version of Clark that performed at Iowa night after night, the version that built the entire commercial foundation this league is currently standing on, has not yet been fully seen in a professional environment that reflects genuine organizational commitment to unleashing rather than limiting her. That version is still out there, and the AP Player of the Week award she just received reflects what she delivers even without it. Now let us turn to what the WNBA Players Association has decided to do with its institutional energy, because this decision is going to generate exactly the kind of conversation that exposes organizational priorities in ways that the union's leadership should have anticipated before moving forward. Reports from a credible and well-sourced sports journalist indicate that the WNBPA is moving to prohibit licenses from using what has become known as the Sophie point. This is the celebratory gesture that Sophie Cunningham developed and that has gone viral with a level of organic cultural momentum that extends well beyond typical sports celebration content. Young fans are recreating it. Little girls are doing the Sophie point with Cunningham at games and in fan interaction moments, generating the kind of authentic, joyful imagery that connects a sport to the next generation of its audience in ways that no promotional campaign can manufacture. And the WNBPA is attempting to restrict its licensing, characterizing it as derogatory. Let us be precise about what is happening here and why it matters beyond the specific gesture. The WNBPA has been conspicuously silent throughout this season on the specific incidents that most directly affected Caitlin Clark and the physical environment surrounding her professional career. When comments were made that observers characterized as inciting concerning behavior directed at Clark, the WNBPA had no visible institutional response. When the pattern of documented physical incidents involving Clark reached the formal intervention of 11 congressional representatives and then the public statements of the NBA commissioner himself, the WNBPA's institutional voice was not prominently and forcefully deployed in Clark's defense. The organization that is structurally supposed to represent and protect every player in this league has not made it a visible organizational priority to stand behind the player who has done more for every player's commercial platform, public visibility, and earning potential than any other individual in the league's recent history. But the institutional energy has been found to attempt to restrict the Sophie point. That prioritization is not a neutral or coincidental choice. It is a documented decision about where this organization's protective instincts are directed. And it tells a story about the internal culture of the WNBPA that is considerably more revealing than anything the union would choose to communicate about itself in a formal press release or a carefully managed interview. Sophie Cunningham has been one of the most authentic and genuinely positive stories of this season. She has been honest, direct, and publicly supportive of Clark in ways that generated real and sustained fan appreciation. She has stood up for what is right at moments when other voices in this league have been politically calculating their positions. The Sophie point went viral not because it was engineered or promoted with marketing dollars. It went viral because it is genuinely joyful, because it connects with people in an authentic way, and because it has become associated with a player who has earned the affection of the fan base that this league desperately needs to retain and grow. Young girls are doing the Sophie point. Fans are recreating it with Cunningham at games and public appearances. It has become part of the organic fan culture of this era of WNBA basketball. An organic fan culture of this nature is worth more than anything an institutional marketing budget can produce. The WNBPA's response to this is to characterize it as derogatory and move to restrict it through licensing limitations. It is genuinely difficult to construct a more self-defeating institutional decision in the specific context of a league that is urgently trying to maintain and grow the fan engagement that this specific moment in its history has provided. The Sophie point is connecting fans to this sport. It is generating images of young girls lighting up in the presence of a player they love. It is producing exactly the kind of cultural resonance that turns casual observers into committed fans over the long term. And the WNBPA is trying to shut it down. The contrast with what this organization has not done throughout this season is the most revealing part of this story. The union that could not find its institutional voice to stand publicly and forcefully behind Clark during a season that produced congressional intervention and the NBA commissioner's public rebuke has found the organizational motivation to attempt to ban a viral fan celebration connected to Clark's most outspoken supporter on the roster. That tells you everything you need to know about where this organization's internal cultural sympathies actually lie. The broader institutional environment continues to generate its own concerns simultaneously. The situation involving a prominent women's basketball coaching figure being publicly characterized in racially loaded terms without credible evidentiary support is something this league's leadership needs to address with the kind of clear and specific institutional voice that separates documented behavior from unsubstantiated accusation. A coach with nearly 2 decades of service to women's professional basketball does not deserve to have her legacy and her character assaulted based on the kind of evidence that has actually been offered. When that characterization was doubled down on in a public pregame setting, it extended a narrative that undermines the credibility of legitimate conversations about equity and representation in sports. Attaching those genuinely important conversations to unsubstantiated claims does not advance them. It damages them by providing easy targets for dismissal and by directing institutional energy toward manufactured conflict rather than toward the documented and real inequities that deserve serious, sustained attention. The absence of institutional clarity from the Commissioner's office on this specific situation is itself part of the pattern. When the leadership at the top of an organization fails to provide clear standards and clear accountability for what can and cannot be said in public forums without evidentiary basis, the space fills with exactly the kind of controversy and institutional disrepair this situation reflects. Let us state the complete picture of where this league actually stands right now in terms that are direct and fully honest. Caitlin Clark is the AP Player of the Week. She is averaging nearly 8 assists per game while under a minutes restriction and managing an active back injury. She produced the first 40-point, 10-assist game in WNBA history in the most recent stretch of games. She is the fastest player in league history to reach 200 career three-pointers. She is generating historic individual statistical production in a sport that has never seen anything like what she does. And she is doing it in an organizational environment that has produced physical incidents requiring formal congressional response, officiating patterns the NBA commissioner publicly called unfair, coaching decisions that generated sustained national scrutiny, and now a player union movement to restrict the viral fan celebration most closely associated with her strongest public supporter on the roster. The WNBPA has not stood publicly and forcefully for Clark throughout any of this. It has found the institutional motivation to move against Sophie Cunningham's gesture while remaining largely absent from the situations that most required organizational voice and protective advocacy for the players most directly affected. And simultaneously, Clark is winning awards, making history, and averaging nearly 8 assists per game on a minutes restriction. The contrast between what the institutional infrastructure surrounding this player has produced and what she has produced despite that infrastructure is the defining story of this entire season. It has reached the congressional record. It has reached the NBA commissioner's public statements. It has reached international media organizations covering this sport from multiple continents. It has generated the kind of sustained and serious attention that professional sports leagues spend decades trying to manufacture and cannot buy. It has not reached the WNBPA's institutional decision-making process in any way that has produced protective organizational action toward Clark. But it has apparently produced enough institutional awareness to motivate an attempt to restrict the Sophie point. The record will reflect both of these things permanently. The union's choices throughout this season will be part of the historical accounting of how this institution used its authority during the most significant period in the league's commercial history. That accounting is not going to be flattering. Clark, meanwhile, will be in that same historical record for a completely different set of reasons. For the AP Player of the Week awards, for the 41-point, 10-assist game, for the 200 career three-pointers made faster than anyone who came before her, for showing up every single time competition demanded it, regardless of what the institutional environment around her was producing. You cannot stop the greatness. It is visible in the award she just received. It is visible in the records she keeps setting, and it will be visible in the permanent historical record of this era long after every controversy surrounding it has faded into background noise. The league has a choice that is running out of time to make. It can align itself with what Clark represents and build around it honestly and urgently, Or it can continue making decisions like attempting to ban the Sophie point while staying silent on the situations that most required its voice. One of those paths leads somewhere worth going. The other leads to being a footnote in the story of a player who succeeded despite the institution that should have been her greatest advocate. The AP Player of the Week award is in Clark's hands. The Sophie point ban attempt is in the WNBPA's institutional record. The contrast between those two facts says everything that needs to be said about where this league's priorities have been focused and where they need to urgently redirect.